Question: what is the role of diet in spirituality? Is meat really that bad? Well, as I might have mentioned once or twice before, I've been on a spiritual path for a long time. And I have met people who were into every conceivable diet or approach to diet that I think you can find on earth. And I have met many spiritual people who are very passionate about diet. And I think it's very, very important for them. So the one thing I really would like to say about diet is listen to your body and don't try to force an idea upon your body. Because I've seen spiritual people do this over and over and over again. I've seen thousands of people do it. And I've seen people with one diet, they are very passionate about it. This will solve all your problems. Then there are other people who have another diet that actually goes against the first diet. They are opposites. They are incompatible. But they are just as passionate about it. And obviously you can look at this and say, well, they probably can't both be right. But what I'm saying is, it's not about the diet. It's about the approach to your body. Because many, many spiritual people have a very unbalanced, unhealthy, non-constructive approach to the physical body. And so what happens is that they come up with an idea. I call it the ideological approach. Because you find an idea that talks about diet. And then you become convinced that this is the only right approach to diet. And this is the only way to get the good health that you want and that you don't have right now. So now you throw yourself into following this diet very strictly, and you're not listening to your body. You're not listening to what your body is saying, how it's reacting to this diet. And so it's like what I have explained in many of my videos is we have 4 levels of the mind or 4 lower bodies. There's the identity, the mental, the emotional, and the physical. And the physical body is not really a physical body. It's just the densest part of our total energy field of these 4 levels. So the physical body is very, very dependent on what is happening in your emotional, mental, and identity minds. Because it's like you have a movie screen, and a movie screen is the level of your physical body. Then there's the movie projector, but there are 3 film strips in the projector: your identity mind, your mental mind, and your emotional mind. And they are projecting onto the physical screen. So the reality is that your physical body, your physical health, is a product of what is being projected onto your physical body from your emotional, mental, and identity level. So if you have an illness or an imbalance, there's a psychological component to it. Now, I'm not here saying you shouldn't take physical measures to deal with an illness or lack of health or whatever it may be. But hear what I'm saying. You have certain conditions in your 3 higher bodies that are being projected constantly onto your physical body. Now you're deciding with your mind, often with a mental mind. Here's the right diet. Now you are forcing your body to do something at the physical level. But you're not changing what's being projected at it from the higher levels. So now you may have 2 different things you're doing. What you're doing at the physical level and what you're projecting on your body. That's not necessarily good for your body. They are working against each other. So what is it you're actually doing? What many spiritual people are doing, myself included, for many years, we are trying to force our body. Because we actually have the idea that our body is a hindrance to our spiritual growth, and our body is a negative, and our body is impure, and our body is bad, and we are not accepting our bodies. And this is understandable, because for thousands of years, just look at it, both in the West and in the East, spiritual people have had a negative attitude to the body. The body is a hindrance to your spiritual growth. It's something that has to be overcome. It's something the body has to be disciplined. You have to basically beat your body into submission. And so you have possibly for lifetimes been doing this, trying to beat your body into submission. And now you are accepting some kind of idea about a diet, and now you are trying to beat your body into submission with that diet. But what was it Einstein said? If you keep doing the same thing and expect different results, you are insane. So maybe you should try something different. Instead of beating the body into submission, perhaps you should try listening to your body and working on your attitude to the body, your psychology around the body. Can you actually accept your physical body? Can you love your physical body? What is your basic attitude to the physical body? There's an enormously complicated psychology around our relationship to the physical body. And it goes not only in the emotional body and the mental, but even to the identity, where we often, as spiritual people, we think the body is some kind of alien thing that we've just taken on, and it causes us a lot of pain and trouble and so forth and so on. And so there's a lot there that to resolve, which in my view is much more important to resolve than looking for the ultimate diet. So anyway, that is my basic attitude to diet. That when people take this ideological approach to trying to force the body by a certain diet, it already shows that they're not listening to their body. And if you're not listening to it, you're not really open to resolving the psychology that actually causes the body to have certain conditions. I'm not saying all conditions can be resolved by resolving psychology. I'm not saying you shouldn't do something physical to deal with an illness or condition. I'm just saying, don't try to, it's like diet becomes a continuation of the attempt to force the body, and it was the attempt to force the body instead of working with the body created the imbalance in the first place. Okay, so kind of went off on a tangent there, but back to the question. What is the role of diet in spirituality? Well, of course a diet can help or hinder your spiritual growth. I mean, it's obvious that if you eat junk food and prepared food that's already cooked and you just heat it up in the microwave, it's not the optimal diet for your spiritual growth. Basically what you want, the way I look at it is, you want to find a diet that fits your individual body. Diet is an individual thing. And that's why I don't like the ideological approach where you say, oh, here's this person who came up with this wonderful diet and it works for everybody. It should work for everybody. You need to be sensitive. Find a diet that works for you where the body gives you the least amount of trouble. You basically can say you're feeding the body, you have a reasonable level of energy, and you don't have to worry too much about it. I remember a number of years ago, I was in the spiritual movement that had experimented with various diets. And now they came in with this newer diet called the macrobiotic diet. And when I looked into this diet, my immediate reaction was, but I don't have room for two religions in my life. I already have one religion, the spiritual path and the Ascended Master teachings. But if I was to follow this diet the way it's prescribed, it's like having another religion. It was a religion. It became so complicated, so time-consuming. I couldn't spend 3 hours a day cooking and slicing the carrots in a certain way. So I had to realize I have things to do in life, and I just have to find a diet that gives my body the energy it needs. Now, if you have specific illnesses, obviously you should look into if there's a diet that can help. But I'm just saying again, you have to have a balanced approach to this. Because when you have problems with the body, it's because there's an imbalance. And taking an unbalanced approach is not going to solve the problem. The other thing I would say is that diet isn't going to get you into heaven. It can possibly keep you from spiritual growth, as I said, if you eat really unhealthy foods that doesn't give your body the nutrients it needs. But no matter what diet you eat, it's not in itself going to give you spiritual growth. It might get you to the point, as I said, where the body isn't a hindrance for your spiritual growth. But spiritual growth is about resolving psychology. The emotional, mental, and identity level, these subconscious selves that I've talked about in several videos. So for me, what I have seen spiritual people do over the years is that they become so focused on the body, whether it's diet or whether it's doing other things with the body or for the body, so focused on the body that it becomes an excuse for not looking at the psychology. And that is not a constructive approach. That will not give you spiritual growth. It will hinder it. You may have the cleanest, most cleansed body, but it's not going to give you spiritual growth if you don't look at the psychology. Now, the other part of the question, is meat really that bad? Well, again, as I've said, there's the ideological approach, right? And for thousands of years, you can see people, especially in the East, they have taken this ideological approach to the body, to diet. And many spiritual people from the Buddhist tradition, the Hindu tradition, have said, if you're a spiritual person, you can't eat meat. And this is based on an ideological approach, that you're not supposed to harm any part of life, therefore you don't kill animals. And if you want to be a little bit humorous about it, you can say that, yeah, but you can hear a pig scream when it's being slaughtered, but you can't hear a carrot scream when you're picking it out of the ground. And my approach to life has always been balance, you know. So if you are saying, I feel compassion for animals, why don't you feel compassion for any part of life? When do you stop? How far do you need to go? It's like, when I first found the spiritual path when I was 18, most of the people I met were vegetarians. Back then I hadn't even heard about vegans. But now it's vegans. You know, and you have to be a vegan because you can't harm any part of life. But where do you then stop? Because are you living in a house? Are you in some kind of structure where you're eating your vegan diet? Well, if that structure hadn't been built, there would have been a meadow there. There would have been all kinds of insects and reptiles and birds. So you're taking away their living space. And what you basically get to is this very simple thing. You can't exist on planet Earth as it is right now without influencing animal life. So you have to find a balanced approach to this. I'm not advocating you abuse animals. I'm just saying we have to find a balanced approach to everything. And, you know, if you look at it from a ideological, often very emotionally charged viewpoint, then obviously you will say, oh, I can't harm life, therefore I can't eat meat. Or I can't use any product that harms animals. But as I said, how far do you then go? What can you do? How can you live? You literally cannot live on planet Earth. And why? Because, as I've explained in several videos, planet Earth is an unnatural planet. And because it's an unnatural planet, there is this contradiction, animosity, this competition between species that you can see all over nature. And so a more balanced approach, in my view, is to step back. And if you take my video, How the World Was Created, you will see a different approach. Because what you often see in the environmentalist movement and among vegans and vegetarians is that they have this view that nature is this wonderful thing that existed in perfect harmony before human beings entered the stage, and that we can only destroy nature. And I'm not denying that we are destroying nature, but that's because, as I also explained in several videos, we've gone into the duality consciousness. We see ourselves as separate beings. We are separated from nature. We think we have to fight against nature and beat nature into submission. It's an ideological approach to nature. But the balanced approach is to step back, and as I explained in that video, and realize that if we human beings were not on Earth, the planet wouldn't exist. Nature wouldn't exist. The very purpose of the existence of Earth is the growth in consciousness. And that growth in consciousness is centered around the highest life form on Earth, which is human beings, for better or worse. But it actually involves the whole. Nature, the physical planet, is also in this process of being raised up to higher levels of consciousness. I have explained in several videos that the Earth started out as a natural planet, and it was then lowered to the state that it's in right now. But it's in the process of being raised again. But the purpose for this entire thing is growth in consciousness. So you look at this and you say, first of all, we human beings, we have a right to be here. And we have had a negative impact on nature, but that's not our only option. It's simply simplistic to say, oh, we can only do harm. We can only do harm when we are in the duality consciousness. But when we rise above that, we see ourselves as part of a larger whole, and we can work with that whole instead of seeking to beat it into submission with force. And so once we overcome this force-based mindset, we can have a healing, uplifting influence on nature. And that's what we should strive towards. But you see, you're not striving towards that by taking this ideological approach and saying, oh, I'm not eating meat, so I'm saving the planet. And the reason for this is actually, and this is where it gets a little bit tricky to understand, because you have to realize there's an ideal view and there's the practical view of where the planet is at today. As I said, ideally, Earth should be a natural planet. And on a natural planet, no, you're not killing animals and eating them. That's perfectly true. And so many spiritual people are avatars and came from a natural planet, and we have in our minds that it's not necessary or ideal to eat meat. But we fail to realize what kind of a planet we are on right now. And we are not on a natural planet. And because the Earth is not a natural planet, there's two considerations that come into play. One is your physical body. How does it get nutrients? I, many years ago, knew a person who was clairvoyant, and he could see people's auras. And he said that people who are vegetarians don't get enough minerals in their diet. And what helps them survive is that once in a while they're walking down Main Street and they get tempted to eat a soft ice, and that gives them enough minerals that they can survive. Obviously he was putting it a little bit on the edge, but I think the point is valid, because I know people, including my wife, who were vegetarians for many years from the ideological approach. and who eventually came to the point they realized they had damaged their physical bodies because they weren't getting enough minerals. Because the human body can't extract minerals from plants directly. Many minerals. We can't get enough minerals by eating plant food. And that's why we need to eat meat, because the animals have a different kind of digestion. They can digest plants more effectively than we can, and that means they can absorb the minerals. And when they are transformed in their bodies, we can absorb by eating the meat, and we get the minerals we need. So this is what many people I know have come to that conclusion after many years of being vegetarians. But there's also another consideration, that is that Earth is an unnatural planet, and this has deeply affected animal life. In fact, most of the species, animal species you find on Earth today, wouldn't exist on a natural planet. But in order to raise the whole, in order for us to actually raise the animals, the nature spirits that create the animals, we need to interact with them. They need to interact with us. And they are basically here. They grow by serving us. And one of the ways they serve us is we eat them and therefore obtain the nutrients we can't obtain directly. So you see, everything is connected. And when you start realizing that, you realize that in the temporary situation we are in on Earth, where Earth is an unnatural planet, it is not spiritually wrong to eat meat. It has a function. Now, I'm not saying that as a spiritual person you can't decide not to eat meat. I don't have a problem with you deciding it. I'm just saying, are you doing it for an ideological reason? Or are you doing it because you're listening to your body and saying, okay, I actually don't feel my body needs to eat meat right now. Maybe it won't be forever, but at least for a period, I'm not going to eat meat because my body wants to live without the meat. I don't have a problem with that. But the ideological approach, that's what gets to be non-constructive for spiritual people. And I have seen people who have delayed their spiritual growth by trying to force their bodies, and they end up spending so much attention on following a certain diet, and they end up creating imbalances in their body that it actually detracts from their focus on the spiritual path. So I think, honestly, that in most of the more developed countries, if you follow the diet recommendations and eat a varied diet, as much variety as possible, that's a good starting point. I would then say that what I would strive towards is to eat as pure food as possible, that it isn't polluted by physical substances, that it isn't processed, as little processed as possible. Start with natural ingredients. Not something you get in a metal tray that you pop in the microwave. Actually make food instead of heating food. And then there are some things that I've always avoided. But that was just because I had a sense that was important for my spiritual growth. So I never took any kind of drugs, never drank alcohol. I have for many years eaten as little sugar as at all possible. It varies a little bit. I have had periods where I was really, really strict. Didn't eat any sugar. And I try to avoid chocolate, for example, which I feel has a negative influence on my body. But I'm not fanatical about it, because I almost feel like you have to find some kind of a balance. It's more important to have balance than to have this ideological approach, because it's like, again, you listen to your body. You listen to your body. And I also try to eat more of a balanced kind of diet, where I have a mixture of meats and vegetables, and don't eat something that's very expansive, like, for example, sugar and chocolate, which expands, makes you very yin. And but other than that, I think again, the recommendation I would have is don't take the ideological approach. Try to listen to your body and try to resolve the psychology you have in terms of your physical body. How you look at it, how you relate to it. Because really, spiritual people have for a very long time had this very ideological view of the physical body as something impure that works against your spiritual growth. And that's just not the case. I mean, the physical body is our opportunity to learn the spiritual lessons we can only learn in the physical realm because it's the densest. So it's not a hindrance, it's not something to be avoided or disciplined or beaten into submission. It's an opportunity, and we should cherish it as an opportunity to be here, to interact at this physical level. And I think if you do that, you will have a balanced approach to diet, a balanced approach to the body, and this is what will allow you to have the maximum amount of growth without having your body pull you away from focusing on the more, you might say, spiritual activities, even though taking care of the body is actually also a spiritual activity and can be seen as a spiritual activity.